Welcome, welcome. I think we'll get going. Hello and welcome to another inspiring session in the Watermark Masterclass series for 2025. I'm Caroline McAuliffe. I'm a senior partner here at Watermark and I'm delighted to be joined by Craig Calder today. I shall formally introduce Craig in a few moments. Look, over the past 5 years, we've had the privilege of hosting a diverse range of thought-provoking webinars, each one enriched by the insights of exceptional guest speakers. We're incredibly grateful to all of them for generously sharing their expertise and practical advice. If you've missed any of those sessions, you can catch up via the recordings available on our website. Now, before we dive in, just a bit of housekeeping. Today's session will run for about 45 to 60 minutes. You're encouraged very much to submit your questions anytime during the chat, or using the chat, I should say, or Q&A box. Just make sure your settings are switched to visible to panelists and all participants, so everyone can join the conversation. Now, Craig has generously offered to gift a signed copy of his book, Problem Hunter, to the best question asked today. So please get your thinking caps on now. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can throughout the session, and we've set aside time at the end for additional Q&A. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on our website. Craig also encourages, if we do get to the end and your question is left unanswered, he's very happy to have that question. If you write to him, he will answer that. In our latest Watermark Interim Exec survey, 38% of leaders identified problem solving as the second most critical leadership skill, just behind stakeholder engagement. Also in the survey, we identified the top 10 essential future leadership skills. One of those is growth mindset. That is committing to continuous improvement and innovation. That also features there. So these insights really reinforce today's topic and Craig's message. I'm delighted to be joined today by Craig Calder. He is a leadership expert, founder of ThinkClear Group. He is an artist and an author of the newly released book, Problem Hunter. Together, we're going to explore how leaders can build teams that don't just respond to challenges, but actively seek out the right problems to solve, unlocking innovation and driving meaningful growth. We would like to kick things off by finding out where everyone is in the audience right now with leadership challenges. So please complete the poll that you will see on screen. The poll is, what's your biggest leadership challenge right now? If you wouldn't mind answering that question for us. And we will throw the answers up in a moment. So let's have a look. There's a bit of a first amongst equals there, isn't there, Craig?
There is, yeah. Fantastic,
so,
actually.
29% equally driving innovation and aligning cross-functional teams at nearly 30% each, followed by building team capability and managing change there at the end. So I'm really pleased about that answer, Craig, because we're going to cross into that space, into building team capability and aligning cross-functional teams today. So hopefully we'll come up with some answers for people.
Oh, absolutely, we will. In the joining connection between all of those responses is having a problem to solve and doing it well. Either you do it alone or you do it with people. So we'll be able to cover a lot of that ground today.
Great, Craig. So let's start off, Craig, with problem hunting mindset. So can you share with us the inspiration behind the book Problem Hunter? What inspired you to write that?
Absolutely. It was a few years ago, and I actually got a question from a client. I was doing some work for a business called Ventia, which is an infrastructure services business. And my client was a guy by the name of Jonathan Dockney. He was the general counsel of the business at the time. And I'd been doing a number of consulting projects and fractional executive roles for him over the years. And he said to me, Craig, I love what you do. I don't know how you do it, but I want you to keep doing it. And it was a great compliment, but it actually kind of unsettled me a little bit because I developed a skill of finding problems within a business, being able to solve them quickly with other people. And that's kind of what I was employed to do in lots of different ways. And what I realized was that I'd kind of reached a point of my own career and expertise where I thought, I have actually developed some skills. I don't quite know how to express them. And what I'm observing in the teams that I work with and the workplaces that I was engaged to do some work with is that there was two kinds of people. There was the people that took initiative and accelerated their career through taking on new challenges. And there were those that sort of stood back and waited for others to tell them what to do and were kind of getting a little frustrated with the way their careers were moving, but also the leaders that had a number of these kind of people with these characteristics were frustrated that things weren't changing and improving fast enough. And so I took that question and my observations of what was happening in the workplace and said, maybe there's something I can do to help here. And so I took a sabbatical away from doing work and I dived into the world of art, being the creative side. And then I dived into the world of research to try and understand the psychology and the neuroscience behind why we take challenges, why we avoid them, and what we can do better. And so that was kind of the genesis behind the book. I was trying to find a way to help businesses compete and change more rapidly and improve and innovate, but at the same time, create a way for people to not be polarized or petrified by the term problem and actually turn it around the other way and say, look, problem's actually the pathway to growth, personally, also for a business. And so that's kind of the reason behind writing the book.
Great. What is a problem hunter?
Good question. Good question. I took a long time to figure out the title for this book. It wasn't easy. And so the reason for the hunter part of this is when you, like, for example, if you're looking for a house, you don't just look for a house, you're hunting for a house. If you're looking for a job, you're in the market of helping people find, employment and jobs or filling those roles. You hunt for a job. It is with purpose, it's with intent, and you overcome the obstacles to get something really important. And so what I wanted to share was that hunting actually is a really important mindset and skill set that we need. And attaching it to a problem actually creates the innovation and growth in ourselves, but also in a business that you really need. So that was kind of why I chose those two. And what I observed in workplaces was that, in a large part, it's driven into us by our schooling system. We're fed problems to solve. That's what we do through 12 years of junior and high school, and even in university. My experience was you get set a problem and then you go away and find it. It's not until later on in university that you get the opportunity to find a good problem to create an assignment out of and show that you can do that. And so I wanted to turn that paradigm around a little and help explain to people that hunting for problems, even though it might sound pretty unconventional, actually is what we're born to do. It's kind of the essence of our humanity.
Yeah. So how is problem hunting different to problem solving? And why do you think or see it as more valuable?
So if you're problem solving, it's one part of the equation. So you're there waiting for someone to give you a problem to solve. And it's kind of the schooling system. You wait, you get a problem, and you're really good at figuring out a solution. Hunting for the right problem to solve actually is more valuable because what you're doing is you're enabling growth either by taking on a new problem and going, well, we need to solve this because it's something that could inhibit the business or something that could propel us forward. And so your ability to hunt for the right ones and bring them in and solve them is, I think, even more important than just being able to solve them.
Yeah, and you talk about three types of innovation, don't you, in your book? Problem-led, idea-led, and solution-led.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
there's three ways that typically innovation happens within a business. and they're all reasonably good. There are some that are more reliable than others. So there's idea-led, which is your classic research or experimental type innovation. And a great example of that is actually the story behind Google Maps. Do you know how Google Maps came about?
No.
Actually, it's a Sydney-based story. So back in 2003, there's four guys, two of them were named Lars and Jens Rasmussen. They were playing around with maps. And at the time, the internet was a bit clunky. There wasn't a lot of bandwidth. And so online, maps were quite static. So to move from one part of a map, imagine a map this size, to the next part, you actually have to load a new web page, which was incredibly frustrating. And so they thought, what if we just sort of played around with this technology a little bit? Anyway, in 2003, they created a more dynamic technology called Where To Technologies. In 2004, that was acquired by Google. And in 2005, Google released Google Maps, which incorporated the software they developed, kind of as a way of experimenting with this idea. So idea-led innovation is really good. It's one way to do it. The second way is what's called solution-led innovation, which is you've got a capability. Where can I use that capability elsewhere? And I started my career in the consulting world, so at EY, and we were all streamed within certain capabilities. And the path to innovation and growth was go take your solution and use it elsewhere. Maybe it's in a different industry, there's a different market, tweak it a little bit and find another market. But even more than that, it's how businesses can transform and sort of sidestep difficulties. Do you know the story behind how Fujifilm escaped bankruptcy when Kodak didn't?
No, I'd love to hear you
So
talk
this
about
is a good
that.
one. I'm a passionate photographer, and I was living in Toronto at the time. It was in the late 90s, and a good mate of mine, his name is Frank Gunn. He was a press photographer with the Associated Press, and he took me under his wing and said, "Okay, I'll show you how to be a photographer." And so he'd take me to basketball games. So we went to sit and watch the Toronto Raptors, was their professional basketball team. And you'd sit underneath the hoop, right? You sit right on the court underneath the hoop, and you'd have the cameras and you'd be taking shots to hopefully get it as they would dunk the ball with an expression that said, yeah, I got this. But we were using film, and we were using Fujifilm because it was the best kind of film to develop fast images. Within the space of a couple of years when I was living there, it went from film to digital. So this is in the early 2000s. And at the time, Kodak had about 90% market share, American-based business. Fuji had only 10% of the business. That was their whole business. And the leaders in the Fuji at the time, they saw digital come out. And ironically, Kodak invented the digital camera. But they said, oh, no, that's going to be too tricky for us because our business is too wedded to film. Anyway, the guys at Fuji, or the leaders at Fuji said, you know what, this is going to change the game. We need to reinvent our business. And they looked at what they did because they produced film and they produced a way in which to develop film onto paper and have that paper last over time. So they were really good at chemical engineering, and they were really good at finding ways to stop the aging of pigment onto paper. And so they said, okay, what is the solutions that we provide? It's not just making film, it's actually anti-aging. So this is actually really interesting. They said, we are really good at stopping light and oxygen age paper. What else gets aged by light and oxygen? Well, it turns out our face does. So they then what they did was they said, okay, we've developed over 200,000 pigments of color. Maybe, just maybe, we can turn that into ways in which we can create beauty products that actually tackle the signs of aging. And you know what? They've created an enormous business. It's a $3.4 billion business that now represents over 35% of their revenue overall, just by turning a solution they had, which was, we have an archive of over 200,000 pigments, and we're really good at stopping the aging of things. And they applied it to something completely different.
Yeah.
And they used that to innovate a number of other parts of their business. So they moved away from film into other products. So solution-led innovation is another way. The third
Yeah.
way, which is the fastest, most common way, and it's what entrepreneurs largely use, which is called problem-led innovation, which is where you take a problem that exists, a frustration, a difficulty, and you might combine that together with another problem and you create a solution. And a great example of that is the story of how Airbnb came to pass. Do you know that one?
Yeah. You go for it.
Right. So this is back in about 2007. There was a couple of guys living in San Francisco at the time, and they were in an apartment and they were struggling to pay rent. And they were in the design industry, and they noticed that there was a big design conference in San Francisco at the time. And there was some chat on some of the social media boards that said, you know, we can't find a place, you know, to stay. It's expensive in San Francisco. So what they said was, all right, we have the problem of not paying rent. Other people have a problem of where to stay. So what they joined those problems together, and they said, we will put 3 air mattresses in our spare room, and we'll say we'll give you breakfast in the morning, and we'll advertise it as air bed and breakfast, and see what happens.
Yeah.
And guess what? They got, for the duration of the conference, they got people there who said, this is amazing. We've got to stay in a really cool place, and we would never have had this opportunity elsewhere. They then went, you know what? Is this a bigger problem worldwide? And they said, yeah. That was the genesis of Airbnb.
Airbnb.
So these 3 ways to innovate all involve a problem at some point, because innovation really needs a problem and a solution, and it needs commercial viability. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so a path to grow in any business, you would have an element of all 3. If your business is more product-led or research-led, you'll have more ideas. But if it's not, you're more likely to be solution or problem-led. For most people in a business, if you're looking to improve productivity, you will look at ways to encourage people to be problem-led or solution-led, to say, well, this is the way I do things. How can I do it better? Or this is what I currently do. Could I combine it with something else and make a completely new solution that might work? Or problem-led, saying, hey, the problem we have here, or the problem we're serving with a customer, maybe we can combine it with something else and create something better. So all 3 ways have a place. Problem-led is easier. And the reason it's easier is it's psychologically safer. So if you come up with an idea,
what do you mean by that?
well, if you come up with an idea is like this, you know, little seed that comes out of the ground, and it's yours. And if someone says your idea sucks, you go, oh, I suck because it's my idea, right? So psychologically not as safe. But if you point at a problem and say, hey, there's a problem over there, let's everyone stare at it from our own perspectives and see if it's a big problem or not. It's not you. And we're tuned. We're tuned to see problems. And so it's easier for people to do that. So if you're looking to create a culture of innovation, starting with a problem first approach is psychologically safer, and you're more likely to get people to do it. In fact, it's how Procter and Gamble changed their whole business approach to innovation. There's a woman called Claudia Kocher, who she was an accountant to start with, and then she took on the role of head of innovation and strategy about 10 years ago. And what she realized was that the previous approach of the leadership was to tell people, right, you've got to innovate, we've got to do this faster and better. And it wasn't going anywhere. So she said, well, let's bring the big problems out from within the business. And what we'll do is we'll wrap around those people who've come to us with a problem with expertise around problem solving with innovation, or it might be a particular piece of expertise that they needed. And so the first problem that they found was that a team was saying, hey, we've got to change our packaging because, you know, a lot of our customers have said they don't know the difference between our oil of Ulay products. They're saying we can't determine them. They're on the shelf. We don't know which one to buy. And we're just trying to figure out the problem of differentiating our packaging. And so she got this, and over a couple of days, they looked at it from different angles. And what they realized was that that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that customers wanted to know what product to buy before they got in store. They didn't want to stand in an aisle and go, which one? And so they realized that changing the packaging wasn't going to solve the real customer problem. So what they did was they said, let's create a website that has like a product finder. You type in your skin type, the conditions, and then it comes up with what's the best product.
Yeah.
So that then gave a kick to sales, not changing the packaging. And the reason why that worked was um, people brought a problem, they got a better solution, or they better understood what the problem was and could go away and then teach others. And that's how they
Great.
really kicked up their innovation.
Now I've got some questions for you,
Right.
Craig. I'm going to fire
Cool.
them at you. So from Brian, first up, he's been working in New South Wales government for a while.
Yeah.
And his question is, obviously he gets it's complex, it's political, it's self-preservation and budget driven. He found full-time staff. It was difficult to get them to make decisions for some reason. So his question is, how do you get them to solve problems and even go looking and hunting for them when they can't make decisions?
That's a good question. And it comes to the kind of leadership that really fertilizes the ground for innovation. And that's more of an empowering style of leadership. And in government, it tends to be, you get some great pockets of wonderful leadership in government, but it tends to be more control based, which stifles innovation. But if you're working in government, you can actually take on that role of being empowered yourself and empowering your own team. And the way that I've seen teams do that is you offer up a problem as something like a gift for someone to share. And you say, look, I'm not telling people that what others are doing are wrong. It's like we've got something, and you amplify what the implications could be. You're saying, well, if everyone sees the problem that I'm seeing and it continues, it will actually lead to something that I don't think anyone wants to see. And it looks like this. Does everyone else see that? And if
Mm,
everyone else sees the problem and the gap between now and where you could be, then all of a sudden you get some motivation to try and deal with it.
yeah.
Now, if if that then causes people to do the ostrich or bury their head in the sand, then you can go around the problem and try and convince a number of other people to say, look, I see this problem. For a number of reasons, it's not getting traction, but I actually think it's worth solving. So
Yeah.
not to give up with one rejection, create a
Yeah.
little bit more
Persist.
understanding of what it might be.
Yeah. Another one for you from Marina. Can you share a time that you struggled to problem solve and how you use problem innovation to resolve and any lessons learned?
Okay, I'm going to give you a personal story. Um, I have never been good at writing. Now, um, when I chose to write a book as a way to share my experience and what I'd learned, as well as what others had learned, and sort of blend those together, um, in my fantasy world of my mind, thought it would be really easy. It actually isn't. And it was particularly difficult for me because I had carried with me some pretty limiting beliefs about my own ability to write. And so as I sat down about 18 months ago to start writing the book, I had on my wall a big chart saying, right, I'm going to write 2,000 words a week. And by this amount of time, I've actually completed my book. And the book is 72,000 words. And I thought, yep, okay, I'm on track. And so I started writing and it was completely woeful. It was awful. It was a complete word vomit. I had no ability to write, narrative and tell a story
Yeah.
and weave in research. It was just a complete word vomit. And I became frustrated with myself.
Mm,
And when I started to look back at that, and then I started to go, okay, well, I'm not writing the way that I wanted. I'm not achieving what I wanted to do. And I started to get mental blocks. Like the judgment of what I would write became the issue and the difficulty to deal with. And so
yeah.
what I realized was that the beliefs that were blocking my ability to let myself experience writing were quite strong. And so I went back in my own history and um, I went and found a time where I thought, okay, when did I really start to believe I couldn't write anything? And that was at my last year of high school. I went to a local public school in the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and there wasn't a lot of, I guess, emphasis on education within my community at that time. So half of my um, fellow students were stoners. The other half really didn't care. And I'm pretty sure my teacher was a stoner. So, the ability to learn how to write wasn't actually high. And I had no idea. I had no idea how to write. And so I almost failed English. Like, and at the time, if you failed English, you had to repeat the year. So I seriously, I was like this close. And so I formed this view after I scraped through that, no, writing wasn't my bag. And so I went into the world of business. And so I got a business degree. I went to a consulting firm. And so for most of my career, up until I started writing this book, I was using PowerPoint. Happy times, my happy place, because I could write very few words and get a meaning across. To turn that into something where I'm writing expressively in a story kind of way, that was something that I've never done before. And so I've had to unpack my own mind and change that belief. And the way to change it was to acknowledge it, shift it with something more meaningful, and practice. And in the book, Actual Problem Hunter, I talk about that experience. And there's a 3-step way to unpack beliefs that I have in the book, which really helped me. And I learned from other people along the way. And the thing, if you've got a really difficult belief that's rooted in fear, you need to have something with an equal or higher opposite positive charge. And so for me, my daughter was turning 16 last year, and I wanted to gift her a book. And so I wrote her a book as a way almost for me to overcome this limiting belief that I couldn't write a book. And I wrote her a book called My Little Book of Wisdom. It's got 200 pages of ideas, stuff that I've learned, stuff that I have screwed up and
Right.
wish I'd known sooner. And so the ability for me to write that book and bring it into reality then overcame the limiting belief I had that I couldn't write. And then all of a sudden, I started to be able to write more effectively. So
Great.
I guess overcoming limiting beliefs and knowing what they are actually is
Mm.
the path to helping you do
So
things
I've
you've done before.
got one more quick question before we move into the next part of the webinar. From Reed, he can see the risk of people running around the business hunting shadows, thinking they are threats. So how do you keep people aligned on the critical few business needs to achieve your goals?
Yeah, it's a good one. And it comes down to something really simple. The problem isn't a problem unless it matters. And so what you can do is to help people learn to self-diagnose if a problem matters or not. And there's really 4 ways a problem matters. Um, and I talk about this in the book. So the first way is value. It's a very simple one. Is this going to cause us to lose money, make money, or somehow impact our asset value or increase a liability, something like that, something practical? Is this of a scale that we need to pay attention to from a value point of view? The other reason a problem matters is if it could impact time. For example, if you're in a business where time is really important and it might delay or cause more time to be spent on something, then it might matter. The third way is what I call status. So it might impact, your ability, your number one rating of something, or it might impact the compliance status of something, or your rating of your product. Is it a 5-star or otherwise? So if it impacts something important that could impact the way people perceive or your license to operate, that's a problem worth looking into. And the
Mm.
final way a problem matters is what I call well-being. So anything to do with the physical and mental health of people, the environment we live in, all of those sort of things. If it could impact that in a meaningful and significant way, then it might be a problem worth paying attention to. So if you give people a way to see the impact and the importance of a problem, they can self-diagnose if it matters or not.
Great. So I might just flick back to a question I had for you, Craig,
Yeah.
and that's around why it's so important to empower leadership, being the fastest and most reliable style to drive innovation. Why is empowering leadership the fastest and most reliable style to drive innovation?
Um, Good question. It comes down to something really simple. An empowering kind of leadership style, there's a lot of evidence to show that that is the path that innovation and improvement likes to travel. And the reason for that is it's safer for people to do the difficult work of going through I call the the stage of frustration of finding a problem and going through that unknowing of creating a solution. And it's safer because you are able to look at something you don't know, and you're encouraged to take steps yourself to do something. And so by doing that, it unlocks that creativity within inside you. And by unlocking that creativity inside you, you're more willing to go the extra mile to create something that hasn't been created before. Empowering is supporting people to go through, to fail without consequence. It's empowering people to create connections they haven't thought of before, and experiment. Whereas if you're to look at the other way of doing it, which is more traditional command and control, if you're penalized for stepping out of line, then you won't look for ways to do things better. You just say, well, I'm here to do what you tell me, and then you tell me if I need to change, and I'll give you the heads up of whether I want to do it or not. Because the thing that people value the most after the personal safety is freedom. And so if you give people freedom to be the ultimate human that they can be, which is expressing your creativity, then they'll want to be able to do it.
Yeah. I think we'll jump into a polling question now to segue into our discussion around teams. So everyone online, how confident are you that your team can identify and solve unknown problems? You could just answer that one. So it's squarely in the middle, Craig, 60% at somewhat confident.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's better than the other two options below. So somewhat. So there's a tweaking perhaps that needs to happen, perhaps. So why is building teams that can both hunt for and solve problems so important now?
Well, I'll give you an example, and it's one that I think most people will be familiar with, and that's the Macquarie Bank. So back in the late 60s, that was formed as an offshoot of a British bank with 3 people. And then when leader Alan Moss came in the late 2000s, I think it was about 2007 or 9, he said, look, for us to really grow, we need to have an entrepreneurial spirit. We need to be able to find problems, find ways to innovate, and I need to attract people who are innovative and are entrepreneurial. But as a bank, I also need to have a mindset to manage risk. And so he created a culture, a leadership style called freedom within boundaries. And so what that allowed people to do at Macquarie Bank was to apply an entrepreneurial mindset within a limited set of constraints. And interestingly, creativity loves constraints. So he was actually doing what our brains naturally want to do.
Right.
It's like, as an artist, if you stare at a blank canvas without an idea of what you want to paint, it actually is pretty distressing. So you need to have some constraints. It's how our minds work. And interestingly, our minds actually operate quite slowly. So researchers at Caltech have found that our brains operate at around 10 bits per second, and they hold about seven ideas or things at once. Whereas our senses, all of the body's senses, take in around 1 billion bits per second. Our eyes alone take in 10 million bits per second. So our conscious mind it's like trying to drink an ocean through a straw. It's actually really, really limited. And so having this type of approach where you allow people the freedom to innovate, but within constraints, really works well. And that business, Macquarie Bank, has, in terms of investment banks, has out-innovated everybody else.
So there's probably 3 or so trends converging at the moment, would you say, globally, around AI, perhaps global trade shifts, major demographic transition. So what's your comment there regarding product and service innovation, business model adaptation? They'll all be key, won't they, to keeping businesses competitive right now?
Yeah, I think we're entering a really different phase, for not only economy, but maybe even humanity. AI is a great tool. Like in 2023, about 33% of people were using it each week. We're now at the end of 24, we're about 71. Um, Sam Altman of OpenAI saying they've almost got 1 billion active daily
Yeah.
users now. And so that is accelerating because it's a great tool. It can really help you do a lot of things, just like the web was, 20 or 25 years ago. So it's happening, and it's happening at breakneck speed. And our ability to adapt to what it can do and how it will change the way we work, we need to be fast at it. Um, Trade, actually, there's a big reshaping of the way supply chains and the way goods move, services move throughout economies. There's now reshoring, nearshoring, or friendshoring that's happening. And so there's a really fast adaptation taking place around where products are sold or goods are sold, but also how they find their way to consumers.
Mm.
And I guess adding to that is we've got some significant demographic shifts going on. And we've always
Yeah.
heard about an aging workforce, but
Yeah.
between the 50 years from 74 to 24, we doubled the amount of people over 65 from 5% to 10%. Over
Yeah.
the next 50 years, it will double again to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And in low-income economies, there will be 50% more workers under 65 than there will be in high-income economies. So our ability to continue to grow and thrive as an economy, like in Australia, for example, actually is going to take quite a bit of work to adjust.
Yeah.
If you add into that the debt load that states and federally we have, there are going to be some challenging problems, I guess, to solve in the near term. So what
Mm.
I think is that business as usual is it's never really as usual, but the speed of change now is accelerating. So your ability to find and spot problems that are meaningful and come up with adaptive ways to solve them actually is going to be much more important than it was previously.
Yeah. I mean, 90% of our interim executives surveyed in our survey this year have noted that they're already using AI tools. So that is a sign that the shift towards tech-enabled leadership is well underway. Um,
Yeah, I use it every day. I use it every
yeah.
day. What's interesting, I do a lot of writing. AI for writing is great for clarity, but
Mm.
it is horrible for creating emotional connection. In fact, I was on a writing conference a few months ago, and there was an author who was on saying, look, he's what his take is on AI, and he has written 28 books. He's a ghost writer for high net worth people who want to tell their autobiography. And as part of him writing a book about um, communicating in the age of AI, he did a bunch of research. And what he found was he had two passages. One passage was written by AI, and the other one was written by a human. 9 out of 10 people could tell which was written by AI and which one was written by a
Yeah.
human. It's the cadence, it's the emotion. So the emotional charge of words actually comes through if you're a human, but it doesn't if you're AI. And so you don't connect well with
Yeah.
what they call AI written slop. But it is good at giving you instruction. So if you just want to know, do this, 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 and this, or you have to do this at this time, fantastic. But if you want to create emotional connection, it's not great.
No, I've got a few more questions for you. So Mike is asking, people find problems, but often these are symptoms rather than the root cause or underlying problem that needs to be solved. What's your view on that?
Yeah, everything flows downstream from finding the right problem. And there's some really common human reasons why we do that. Um, our mind, when it finds a problem, forms a little bit of distress. And depending upon the significance of it, we might want to limit that distress that we feel, that unknowing that then brings up fears inside us So we try and use our mind to say, look, I've seen this before. This is the problem. Let's go solve it. And it is probably the most common way that wasted effort in a business transpires, where you
Yeah.
solve the wrong problem. And I'll give you a great example. This is you can find this on YouTube. There's a great story of Pringles, which, the chips where they come in the cylinder.
Yeah. I know very
Right?
well.
Me too. So
Too well.
a couple of years ago, the marketers at Pringles, they did a customer research survey globally, and they said, "Okay, do you love our products? What tell me about stuff you don't like." And what came back was that 43% of people said, we get our hand stuck in the can and we really don't like it. It
Yeah.
pisses us off. And so the marketers were going, oh no, that's really bad. Oh, really bad. And so they called a meeting. There's product people, there's commercial people, accountants, there's marketers, and they go, right, we need to change our packaging, right? People are getting their hand stuck in the can. They don't like it. This could impact our sales, whatever. So they started talking about it. And they said, look, how much would it cost to change the can? Like make it bigger so the average hand didn't get stuck. So they did some back of the envelope numbers, the commercial folks, and they said, oh, geez, probably about 50 million globally by the time we retool things, restock things, whatever. And they went, oh, that's a lot. And so
Hmm.
they then started to look at the problem differently. And they said, oh, how do we look at it differently? And so they unpacked what the feedback was. And the feedback was that people were getting their hands stuck in the can and they believed that was annoying. They said, well, what if we change that belief? So instead of being annoyed that it gets stuck, that it's just a happy coincidence to try and get something that's worth it. So that then spurred their idea where they said, let's change the belief rather than change the packaging. How much would that cost? And so the marketing folks said, well, the most expensive and probably the most widely seen advertising spot is the Super Bowl. And how much does Super Bowl ad cost? Well, for $5 million for 30 seconds. Right. Why don't we do an ad that says, hey, if you get your hand stuck in the can, it's worth it. And so they had this hilarious ad where they filmed a young man, probably in his 20s, and he was putting his hand in one of those red cans, the red chips, and he put his hand in and he got stuck. And he goes, oh well. And so he then started living his life with his hand in the can. He got married with it. He's played baseball with it. He went to parties with it. And everybody said, oh, yeah, you got your hand stuck in the can. It's worth it, isn't it? So at the end, they said, yeah, look, sometimes annoying, but worth it. And
Yeah.
it went viral. They got
Yeah.
over 2 billion views with 93% people saying that, yeah, that was fantastic. So they solved what was a better problem than just the initial problem, which is people are getting their hands stuck in the can. Oh, let's change the can.
Yeah.
So it is actually a really important skill to do. And the two ways to do that, number one, whenever you get an initial problem, ask why 5 times. That's a classic consulting
Okay.
model. And the other
Yeah.
thing to do is do what the medical profession do. They have something called a differential diagnosis. So if you've got symptoms, they say, well, what else could it be? And particularly if it's significant symptoms, they try and say, okay, well, we know that a number of symptoms can fit a pattern for a number of problems. Let's try and find if it is a different problem via differential diagnosis. So have someone else with a different perspective have a look
Yeah.
at the issues.
Love it. Going to move on to some practical takeaways and tools for our audience now, Craig.
Yeah.
What are your top 3 strategies for embedding a culture of innovation?
Well, it is leader led, so having an empowering type leadership approach, and you can Google what that is and the kind of behaviors that encourage that, rather than dissuade it. So I encourage people to check out that and have a look at your own leadership style and see where perhaps your leadership approach isn't quite like that. And I guess one of the things I would suggest is that there's a wonderful quote from a 14th century poet by the name of Hafiz that I really like, and he said, "The words you use become the house you live in." So what you say to people and how you communicate actually then is really important to how um, attitudes are formed and how beliefs are formed and how work is done. So there's kind of 3 strategies I would employ to try and shift a business to become more innovative and more aligned to try and improve the way they do things. And they are, make things normal. So experimentation, coming up with ideas, or trying to find problems that are worthy of solutions, make that normal. So make it part of conversations with people. And there are other businesses that have created space for people to do that. A business called W.R. Gore, which is a chemical engineering business in the US, they have a program called Dabble Time, where their engineers are able to spend a little bit of time working on something. And they are a business that you probably have one of their products. They make Gore-Tex. So Gore-Tex is a polymer that goes on fabric that makes it waterproof. And their Dabble Time program has actually come up with some really interesting innovations. So I'm a guitar player, and buying guitar strings that stay in tune is really important. And so one of their engineers, when they were working on a job for Disney, they were trying to improve the way cables worked in, the Disney animatronics, the one you go into Disneyland and those sort of figurines are moving around. They were having a problem where they were a bit stilted. They weren't quite smooth. And they said, look, can you make them smooth? And so W.R. Gore's and engineers went and said, yeah, we can do that. We've got polymers that can probably fix that. So they applied a polymer to it, and it started moving really smoothly, and it looked more lifelike. One of the engineers was also a guitar player, and he said, these strings are a little bit like guitar strings. Maybe if I applied the polymer to that, what would happen? And so he did. He sort of experimented with it a little bit. And what he found was two things. He found that the strings stayed in tune longer than regular untreated strings. And the second thing he found was that the buzz noise you have when you move your hands up and down the fretboard didn't exist because the strings were quite smooth. And so they played with that idea, and eventually it became the Elixir brand of guitar strings, which is one of the best-selling guitar strings in the world. So they normalized experimentation, coming up with problems and ideas, and they allowed people the freedom to do that. The second strategy is make it easy. So make it easy for people to do this, because the best word we have in the English language that most people like to use is no, I'm not doing it. That's too hard. But if you make it easy and you allow people to do things that they didn't think they were able to do before, by just giving them a couple of steps, or creating a little bit of a community of people to show what others are doing,
Bit of
then
a framework.
frameworks to solve problems, create communities like Procter and Gamble did. If you cover a problem, let's work together and we'll give you the skills and the experience of doing it. The business that helped me inspire write the book, Ventia, they've got a program called VenSpark, where they've created a digital platform where people throw problems and solutions in, and people can communicate with each other on how to solve them. So make it really easy, reduce the friction towards trying to innovate and problem solve. And I guess the last, but probably the most important, is to make it safe. Try to do something you don't know how to do can feel risky, right? And the three common fears we have in a business is, and when any work we do, is the first is we fear criticism, because if we get criticized, then we're not enough, and maybe we're not made for the job, right? Everyone tries to avoid being criticized. The second fear we have is the fear of losing control. And if we lose the ability to manage what we need to do ourselves, and that control is taken away through not feeling safe, then we will not try and do things that make us feel unsafe, which is innovate. And the last fear, which is probably the strongest, is the fear of a career impact, where what we do, if that could really impact us, then we will shy away from it. So if you can find a way to manage those fears, and you do that by creating psychological safety and trust and respect, they're the foundations of innovation, foundations of collaboration, then all of a sudden people feel safer to try and do new things.
No, I totally agree, because you can imagine we've all been there where we've put our hand up, put our idea out. It's like opening your heart and being shot down. You're just not going to do it again, aren't you? You're just going to stay silent.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Google figured this out. Google has their moonshot part of their business, which is called X. The leader of that business is called Astro Teller. And what he figured was, he goes, the way ideas normally come up, and whether they're green lit or not, is someone will have an idea, they will share it with someone who they report to and say, hey, I've got an idea. What do you reckon? And it's up to that individual, the leader, to say, like it, don't like it, green light, no green light. And what they realized was that that was actually not the best way to decide if an idea had merit or not. So they turned it around and said, look, we will let reality test whether an idea has merit or not. Now, it's the Kodak example. They came up with the digital technology and said, yeah, that's great. But the leader said, no, 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 that's never going to take off. And by the way, our business is too strong with the opposite, so we're not going to do it. So what they do is they let reality test an idea to see if it's got merit. So they run fast, rapid experiments where they get real user feedback, real customer feedback, low cost, fast, and decide, well, did this idea have merit or does it not?
Yeah.
So leaders aren't allowed to green light something or not before it's been reality tested.
Right. I'm going to go to some questions now, Craig. Your popular questions here. Do you think
Okay.
someone with a fixed mindset, this is from Gail, is inherently unable to hunt problems? So given you probably need a growth mind to hunt for problems, like, you like challenge, you does not accept status quo, restlessness. But is it, I guess what she's saying there is, can you learn this?
Yeah, it's 100% learnable. Now, Carol Dweck came up with the growth mindset model, and diving into that a little bit deeper, whether you have a growth mindset or not depends on how loosely or tightly you hold beliefs. Yeah, beliefs are like the macros of the mind. Neuroscientists have figured out we have like about 100,000 of them running around, and they actually form the way that we operate in the world. So that they're in our subconscious, and they help us make sense of the world because we've only got this really limited capacity in our conscious mind. What I found in my research was that the people that were really good at problem solving and innovating and creating new ideas and letting those take root, they held their beliefs loosely. So they would say, well, I believe this is
Yeah.
the moment. And they would then let reality go, oh, there's something better. It's like the earth is flat. Oh, no, it's round. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Where beliefs are held really tightly through judgment and fear, they become prejudice. And so when you've got beliefs that are locked in place with judgment and fear and are prejudiced, all of a sudden you have that fixed mindset. So that's actually what creates the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
The antidote to that is actually doing a little bit of work to go, well, what are my beliefs? What is the judgment and the fear that keeps them in place? Like my story of I can't write a book because I almost failed. Once you find that root and that fear, and you do the opposite and you give yourself a way to unlock that. So release judgment, release the fear behind it, replace it with evidence that there's something new that you can do. All of a sudden, you open up a whole new world and you become free. So it's those fixed beliefs are the things that cause a lack of growth mindset, and they actually limit our own freedom.
Yeah. I'm going to go to a quick question. This is from Debbie. Do we only innovate when faced with a problem, or can innovation become a mindset to avoid problems?
100%. If you've got a mindset where, let's just say, you've got a particular way of doing something, if your belief is that this is the way we do things now, but it can always, and it will always have to be better, because what isn't improving is actually going backwards. I went to a conference a few weeks ago to watch a guy called Gary Brecker, and he is a human biologist and he's a biohacker. So his interest is in how do you prevent aging? How do you have a better, longer, happier life? And what he said about aging was that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort at a cellular level. That's what we do. The more comfortable we are, the more our cells say, well, we're not learning, we're not growing, we're not needed to improve. We will actually wither and die. You see that in your body. Like if you don't go for a run for a few years and you decide, oh, I'll do that again, guess what? Your body goes, that's
It
hard.
hurts.
And the same happens in our mind. Neurologically, between the neurons in our brain are things called synapses. And if you are learning, your synapses, the pathways between them become stronger. So you're able to have something called neuroplasticity, which is changing your brain easier and easier. And the way you do that is through problems. You need to have enough of it. There's some research out of university in the US, and they it's escaping me at the moment. I think that's right. It was Princeton University, where they found that the optimum ratio between I know how to do something and I have no idea is around 85% knowing, 15% I've got no idea. I have to fail, learn, adapt. And what that does, it gives just enough confidence that you can do and just enough that you don't know how to do. And it then trains the brain to learn how to adapt and solve problems regularly. So it's like going to the gym for the mind, and we need to do it.
Yeah. Love it. Now, I've got another question for you. It's going to be one of our final questions from Jane. She loves the idea of problem hunting, but she believes it's critical to understand the problem before you go headlong down to try and address it. And she thinks there's disagreement often over what the actual problem is. So, any advice around how you can expedite the identification process?
It is the single most valuable skill that I think someone can have right now, which is diagnosing the right problem. In the medical
Mm,
profession, 75% of all litigation for malpractice is caused by diagnostic error. It is inherent in the way our minds work. We allow our perspective, weaknesses, and our limiting beliefs to color what it is that we think is real.
mm,
So the fastest and the most effective way to make sure you're solving the right problem is to do two things. The first is, as a group of people, if you're working within a team, to acknowledge that there is always more than one way of seeing and looking at a problem. And the most senior person in the room isn't always the person that understands the problem better than anyone else. Have you heard of the term hippo, the highest paid person's opinion? In consulting, we would always look for the hippo and go, okay, well, we need to just find a way to manage what their opinion is. And if it's not based on what we see, how do you manage that in a diplomatic fashion? So acknowledging that there is human fallibility in what we see and perceive, and that everyone's opinion and everyone's perspective can have value,
mm.
and finding a way for people who are looking at the problem to see it differently and express their point of view in a way that people can understand and hear and know that that's actually really valuable. And the second thing to do is to make sure that once you've diagnosed the problem, so you've described it in a way people can understand, to have someone who is absolutely nowhere near the problem actually have a look at it. To say, well, tell me about what it is. And if you can explain it clearly and crystally,
Mm,
then they
mm.
go, yeah, okay. And what they will naturally do is they will ask why 5 times. They'll go, well, tell me why that is. Well, have you looked at this? What about this? And
Mm.
so it just stops you getting away from any cognitive biases, any limiting beliefs you might have by
Yeah.
having someone else do that. There's Pixar, the animation business, incredibly creative. What the leader of that business for 30 odd years is a guy called Ed Catmull. He founded it with Steve Jobs. And
Yeah.
what he found was that in every movie, without fail, the
We've got
director at
1 minute
some
now,
point,
Craig.
the director will get lost. Every director gets lost in the story. It's like not seeing the forest for the trees. So they came up with this concept called brain trust, where at a certain point in a movie, the director would come and say, hey, here's where I am. I'm stuck with this character. I'm stuck with this part of the story. And the brain's trust would be people outside of the movie would say, here's what I'm seeing. This is what I reckon what reckon might be the issue. And it was up to the director then to take that and do the work to fix it.
We're going to have to call it a day. Ali, could you pop up Craig's contact details and QR code for everybody before they leave? There you go.
Oh,
Please
cool.
contact Craig post the webinar with any questions we didn't get to. I'd love to thank you, Craig, for such a rich conversation. So our audience, whether you're leading transformation or driving a culture of innovation, there's so much here to take away.
Great. And the QR code is, I do a free weekly newsletter called the Clear Cut, which is ways to cut through the difficulty of a problem with proven strategies. So,
And we will
awesome.
make a decision offline about the winner of
Yeah,
Craig's book. So we've run out of time. Thank you all so much for participating. It's been a wonderful topic. We could talk for hours, but see you on the next Watermark webinar. Have a
thank you
great
so
day,
much.
everyone.